Welcome to Counting in Radians. So instead of memorizing all of the radians around the unit circle, or even trying to convert everything from degrees to radians all of the time, I've got a much better way. And that is just learning how to count in radians. It's really simple once you get the hang of it. So we're going to start with 90 degrees because I think it's a simple one and it'll give you the idea. So right now you have from here to here, you have 180 degrees. And 180 degrees is pi. Here's our conversion right up here. So if we break pi into two pieces, we've broken it into half. And that is half of pi, or pi over 2. Or you can think it 1 pi over 2, 1 of the two pieces. So we have half a pi, then a whole pi, and then we add another half, which is a pi and a half. So 1.5 pi really is 3 over 2, right? So this is 3 pi over 2 here. And then all the way back to 2 pi. This works for all of them. So if you look at 45 degrees, now again we have 0 and pi, but instead of breaking up the from 0 to pi into two pieces, we're now going to break it up into 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. 45 degrees, as you can see by our conversion chart, is pi over 4. So this is pi over 4. So that's 1 pi over 4. So the next one is 2 pi over 4. But we already know this is pi over 2. So we're just going to leave it as pi over 2 because that's not simplified. The next one is going to be, now we have 3 pi's over 4. 1, 2, 3. And the last one is 4 pi over 4. And that's important to keep up there because that'll help us with our reference angle later. The next one is 5 pi over 4. Then we have 6 pi over 4, but again, we don't need that one because that's 3 pi over 2 if it reduces. So that's 6 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4. And the very last one is 8 pi over 4, which we know is 2 pi. Now we are going to keep that because it will help us with our reference angle later. And you know you've counted correctly when it's 8 over 4 is 2. Okay, now we're going to break the pi up into 60-degree pieces. As you can see, pi divided by 3 is 60 degrees. So there are 1, 2, 3 60 degrees pieces between 0 and pi. So the first one is 1 pi over 3, or just pi over 3. And the next one is 2 pi over 3. And then last but not least is 3 pi over 3. And we're going to leave that again. We keep going. We've got 4 pi over 3. One more is 5 pi over 3. And last but not least is 6 pi over 3. And 6 divided by 3 is 2. So we know we have 2 pi and we're good. Again, that's 1 pi over 3, 2 pi, piece 1, piece 2, 3 pi over 3, 4 pi over 3, 5 pi's over 3, and finally 6 pi over 3. Now we're going to do 30 degrees. So 30 degrees is pi over 6. And so if you notice, I'm missing some pieces right here. I did not put this 30 because you can go 30, 60, 90. And I didn't do that because this we already have. Because 30 plus 30 is 60. And so we already know that 60 is pi over 3. And so we're not going to need that. But we're going to see again what that looks like. I'll go around so you guys can see that. Okay, so let's start. The very first one is 30 degrees. That is pi over 6. That's 1 pi over 6. So if we were to go to this one, that would be 2 pi over 6. But again, that reduces to pi over 3, so we don't need it. We already have that. The next one would be 3 pi over 6. Again, that reduces to pi over 2. We don't need that one. So let's go back. We've got 1 pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, 3 pi over 6. The very next one is 4 pi over 6, which we also have, and then 5 pi over 6. We go one more, we get 6 pi over 6. And one more, we get 7 pi over 6. Again, we don't need all of these because we already have these. They're 60 and 3 pi over 2. But we need this one. And we're like, what could this one be? I've lost count. Now you can go back and count everything. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 pi over 6 is this rotation. But an easier thing to do is when we go one more, we know it's 12 pi over 6. And 12 divided by 6 is 2 pi, so we're good. But here's the thing. If you go back 1 from 12 pi over 6, 12 pi over 6 minus 1 pi over 6 gives you 11 pi over 6. And if you're at 6 pi over 6, if you go back 1, minus pi over 6 is 5 pi over 6. And if you go forward 1, 6 pi over 6 plus pi over 6 gives you 7 pi over 6. So you really don't actually have to count all around. That's why I kept telling you guys to keep this and keep this, because if you have those, it's easy to find the angles that are right next to it. And these are all going to be your reference angles for your special triangles, so they're really important. Okay, so to review, let's see what we have. We have 0, right? But it's also, and then we have pi. So we're going to go around in our pi over 6's first. So pi over 6, because it's 180 divided by 6 is 30. So 1 pi over 6. And then this is going to be 6 pi over 6. Where does that lead us to? If we go back 1, it is 5 pi over 6. And if we go forward 1, it is 7 pi over 6. So the rotation all the way around, this is going to be 12 pi over 6, which gives us 2 pi. So when we go back, we know 12 pi over 6 minus 1 pi over 6 is 11 pi over 6. So next thing we're going to do is how about pi over 4? So for pi over 4, we have 1 pi over 4. That is right there. 2 pi over 4, which gives us pi over 2. 3 pi over 4. 4 pi over 4, which is pi. Check. 5 pi over 4. 6 pi over 4, which is 3 pi over 2. 7 pi over 4. And then 8 pi over 4 is where we land. Yes, 8 divided by 4 is 2, so 2 pi. And remember, 45 degrees is just halfway between 0 and 90, so these are the halfway points that we're going to. All right, last but not least is our beautiful, easy 60 degrees. So here we go. Let me erase all this fun stuff, and I will grab my blue pen for 60 degrees. All right, so 60 degrees. So the first 60 degrees, remember, 60 is 180 divided by 3. So it's pi over 3. So it's 1 pi over 3, and then we have 2 pi over 3. And then 3 pi over 3 is here. Yay, good with pi. And then another one, 4 pi over 3. And 5 pi over 3. This is kind of a mess. And then 6 pi over 3, which is 2 pi. Woohoo! And it's really great because if you look at this, you can notice that these are our reference angles. So if you're ever like, okay, which one's 30, which one's 60? Obviously 30 is closer, and then 60 is further away. So 30 is closer, 60 is further away, and don't forget we always, 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 remember the screamer, you're always trying to get to the ground. So our reference angles will always go up to the x-axis. And more on that later. Thanks, guys.